Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide to Omega Alphascape V3 on the Savage difficulty. This encounter against Omega is split into several different phases. To skip to a specific phase or mechanic, please use the timestamps in the description of the video. Before we go any further, would like to thank some of my fellow Elysium members for submitting their footage so we could have multiple POVs for the guide. We have Keonu Linaire, a healer POV for this video. We have Kipling for the tank POV, and Happy Gilmore, the bard in the same static that I am in, for their POV for a single mechanic as well. So thank you to all of them. For Phase 1, Omega mostly teaches you his basic mechanics. For one, there is no duty action here like in normal mode. He also has his tank buster from normal mode, Mustard Bomb, which is not only a hard-hitting AoE tank buster, but it leaves behind a bleed on any target struck for some time, so watch for the extra damage that's going to be taken here. You can tank swap after some of the mustard bombs, but during mechanics later in the fight, you're not really going to have that option. Atomic Ray is room-wide damage that you should mitigate and heal up after. Flamethrower in Savage is changed into an attack that targets all 8 players with a conal AoE that deals heavy damage. We spread out in 8 different directions around the boss for this mechanic at all points in the fight. It also follows a first blast up with a second blast that hits in the exact same area the first blast hit. So after taking the first hit of Flamethrower, quickly step away from the affected area to prevent taking the second hit, which will be lethal. Make sure there is space between each Flamethrower AoE so all players have some room to dodge. After the first Flamethrower will be Starboard and Larboard Wave Cannons. This is the same as normal mode, though the short AoE at the end of the cast won't appear. If he uses Starboard Wave Cannon, dodge to Omega's left flank. If he uses Larboard, dodge to Omega's right flank. He will then always follow up the first wave cannon with a random second one which has a faster cast time. If he uses the same wave cannon as his first one, run through him to his other flank. If he uses the opposite wave cannon second, meaning let's say he did Starboard first then Larboard second, then just stay where you dodged the first one. Be near the center of his hitbox so you can quickly run through in case you need to do that. His final Phase 1 mechanic is Peripheral Synthesis. Now assuming everyone is alive, this will target all 4 DPS and both healers with either a yellow or blue fist that continuously tries to hit them with small AoEs that confuse upon hitting someone. If not dealt with properly, or if the fist target dies, the fist will eventually explode on the raid for high damage and vuln stacks. To remove these fists from the encounter, you must stack the AoEs of 2 different color fists. So one yellow fist AoE must punch the same area as one blue fist AoE. Since it's random which DPS and healers get which fist, we just kinda YOLO'd a system to make it work. With a standard 2 melee, 2 ranged comp, with 2 healers of course, if both melee got different colors, they'd stack up their AoEs. If the 2 ranged got different colors, they'd stack theirs up, and if 2 healers got theirs, they'd stack theirs. Now in cases where this didn't happen, which is fairly often, we simply let the healers select their targets first, followed by the ranged DPS. Melee regularly just try to minimize movement near the boss and let either a healer or ranged walk up to them and make them the suitable partner for their fist. Also keep in mind the tank gets hit by a mustard bomb here, so don't skimp on healing or mitigation while dealing with these fists. When 2 opposite color fists collide, the AoEs they stack up lose their effect and simply deal a few thousand damage if you stand in them. I like to compete with the other DPS because when they do stack with each other, they drop a buff on the ground called Live Wire, which provides an approximately 10% damage buff to whoever receives it. You should try to give this to your highest DPS players, make sure they receive this buff and utilize it for the next 25 seconds before Omega enters his ad phase. Shortly after Peripheral Analysis, Omega will cast Program Loop before leaving the arena and initiating his ad phase. At this point, the very center of the room and the edges of the arena become lethal to the touch, so stay out of them. By the way, unlike in normal mode, you can also fall off this arena, though it hasn't really been too important yet unless you get hit by the second Flamethrower. For the ad phase, you'll be asked to execute a series of mechanical dances while simultaneously killing the level checker in the center of the room. Upon spawning the level checker, we'll cast Execute and mark all 8 players with Looper. When this debuff expires, the player will become Hysteria'd and run to the nearest death zone. Luckily, it can be removed by properly standing in the meteor markers Omega places around the arena. For the first executable, the 4 DPS will be tethered to one of the tanks and or healers. We assign the DPS to the north and east sides of the arena, while the tanks and the healers take the west and south sides. This lets you spread apart so you can properly identify who you're tethered to, on top of being the assigned positions you're going to use for the tethers themselves. These tethers are magnetically charged, which you've probably seen in other fights at this point. So opposites attract and pull the players towards each other, while similar charges will push the players away from each other. After the charges are identified, 4 meteor markers will appear, 2 near the center of the room and 2 near the edge of the room. You want 2 players to be hit by each meteor to properly disarm the meteor and remove the looper debuff. All you have to do is line up your charges and use them to either push or pull everyone to the right meteors. So players with opposite charges should make sure to get pulled towards the center meteors, while the same charged players should aim to get knocked towards the outside ones. Make sure everyone is loosely spread to identify who you're tethered to, and then move to your position based on those assigned sides that I mentioned earlier. After this, the level checker will cast another executable, which is a much more interesting dance. The 2 players furthest from the level checker when this cast will be marked with a blue tether called Chains of Memory. These 2 players will be tethered together, creating a large line AoE between the 2. If any other player passes through this line, they will instantly be hysteria'd and run to a death wall. Additionally, the 2 players with Chains of Memory need to be far away from each other, or they will gradually begin stacking memory degradation. At 6 stacks, both of these players will become hysteria'd as well. We personally assigned our healers to be responsible for the Chains of Memory, having each one stand either on the far east or far west side of the arena when Executable is casting. Once the chains are out, the other 6 players will receive Looper again and must also disarm meteors near the center of the room. Now, the meteor pattern you get in the first executable determines the position of the meteors in the second executable. If the north and south meteors are towards the center of the room during the first executable, then the first meteor in the second executable will start near the northwest side of the center of the arena. If the north and south meteors are towards the outside of the arena during executable number 1, then the first meteor marker in executable number 2 will be on the southeast side of the center of the room. The party adjusts to be next to whichever one will pop up first, whether that be all north or all south, minus the 2 chain targets. When executable number 2 starts, the 2 chain targets will stay still until the first meteor drops. The 2 players with the shortest looper debuff timers will get hit by the first meteor that comes down. The shortest timer should be approximately 12 seconds when you receive it. After that first meteor hits, the 2 chains should rotate at the same time and speed clockwise, while the rest of the party does the same. There will be 2 meteor markers the chained players each need to be hit by on their opposite sides of the arena. Rotate until they are inside their meteors, and then wait for the second inside meteor to strike. The next 2 looper debuff timers, these ones should be about 20 to 21 seconds, should get hit by the second inside meteor. Then the chains start rotating again to their next ones. Finally, the third inside meteor will go off and hit the 2 remaining looper debuffs. The level checker will do reset at this point, a point-blank AoE, followed immediately by reformat, which is a donut AoE. The level checker will do these back to back, so step out of those after getting your meteor markers. After the chains spin to reach their final meteor marker, they'll have to dodge reformat, and then you'll have a bit of the remaining time to kill the level checker before it uses force quit and wipes the raid. Quick tip for those who are rotating the Chains of Memory, try to be a little bit further back instead of being directly east or west. If your party's starting on the north side of the arena, kind of lean a little bit south, because it's really easy for players running at different speeds to move the line towards the rest of the group. You want to try to make sure you're just a little bit further towards the opposite side of the arena while still staying completely opposite of each other. After killing the level checker, Omega will return and prepare his Delta attack. With no duty action, you will be prompted to use a tank LB3 to survive the attack. So no, getting through the level checker with the DPS LB3 is not an option. I'd recommend mitigating this attack even further on top of the tank LB3, as once Delta attack hits, you'll have 10 seconds to ensure everyone reaches full health before they are instantly killed anyway. Stack up, LB3, mitigate, and quickly heal to enter Omega's next phase. Omega turns the dial up a little bit after Delta attack. His Flamethrower comes with an AoE that drops a fire puddle on the ground now after it hits. With the Flamethrower initial hit and the AoE hit after, make sure that players are topped with some shields here, and consider some additional damage reduction on the boss itself, such as an Addle. We all rotate to our right and drop the fire puddle slightly out of melee range to make sure no one accidentally steps in one during the next mechanic. There will immediately be a starboard or larboard wave cannon after this, and then a second wave cannon after that, which is the same as phase 1. Omega will then introduce a new tank mechanic. He will tether to a random player other than the main tank, and after hitting the main tank with a mustard bomb, fire an AoE at the tethered player. This AoE will place Doom on any players not at full health, so if you're not at full health, you're dead. If you are at full health, it will just greatly reduce that player's max HP instead. You'll want the current off tank to be healed to full, intercept the tether, and bring it away from everybody else. It's a pretty large AoE, but just a bit outside of melee range is safe so long as everyone else is on the opposite side of Omega. Just watch that mustard bomb and don't kill everyone by accident, main tank. Now, since the off tank will have their max HP reduced by a lot, of course Omega's got to put that to the test, so he'll use an atomic ray right after the tether. Make sure to give that player in particular some bonus mitigation, such as a dedicated shield or an APOC to ensure that they survive the room-wide AoE. You gotta look out for the rest of the party too, but that player is at the highest risk here. After the tether plus atomic ray, Omega will do a new form of Peripheral Analysis. This will mark 2 DPS, 1 healer, and 1 tank with a tether to a giant fist, which will hit in a giant line AoE for massive damage plus a knockback when the ability finishes casting. We have each tethered player go to the side their fist is coming from, and position themselves about halfway between the corner to their left when looking at the fist and the cardinal edge of the room. That's about 5 of these little panels along the outside if you want to count them out. They also get as close to the edge of the arena as possible without walking off. Now, if everyone is at 5 panels to the left of the cardinal edge, this should create a hashtag looking pattern with all the non-tethered players stacked tight in the center of the room. So long as this positioning is achieved, everyone should be fine. Throw some shields up before these tethers come out though, as the fists themselves hit pretty hard, plus there's going to be some healing that's needed afterwards. After the first peripheral analysis comes a stack marker, so everyone head for the center of the room, heal up, and mitigate this. Another peripheral analysis happens just after this, targeting the other 4 players who weren't targeted the first time. Same rules apply to them though, and after this peripheral analysis, Omega will do starboard or larboard AoEs. Make sure everyone is clear what direction Omega is facing and get to the appropriate side after the fists actually execute their attacks. Dodge the second one as well, and you are actually done with phase 3 of the encounter. The final phase begins with Omega Casting Update Program. This will enhance some of his old abilities and grant him access to new ones altogether. The first new effect is that Flamethrower now applies a strong dot to every player, so the mitigation and healing for these needs to go up accordingly. Luckily, the first Flamethrower here is not going to have those Fire Puddle AoE, so you can focus on learning how much damage the damage over time effect does. You'll immediately notice that his starboard and larboard patterns have now been changed to larboard or starboard surges, and will perform the same attack twice in a row in very rapid succession. You need to quickly move to the opposite side of Omega after his starboard or larboard surge begins casting to avoid the second laser. After the surge, Omega will center himself and begin casting Pantokrator. For the duration of this attack, Omega will stop auto-attacking and instead go crazy, casting AoEs and dealing damage to the entire raid. The Cryo's small missiles will hit constantly, dealing light AoE damage that repeats itself frequently throughout the entire Pantokrator. The first series of attacks he will do will target random players with AoEs under them. He'll do this 4 times back to back before doing a split damage line AoE after the 4th one. We stack up and dodge the AoEs together, so we're always together for that split damage AoE at the end. We like to move in a line directly through Omega's hitbox for this, mostly because this movement will come in handy for the eventual second Pantokrator. We make this little L shape at the start just to delay the AoE slightly, but feel free to just run through instead from max melee range to max melee range on the other side. After the split damage AoE, quickly heal up and prepare for the next series of attacks. Omega will target the 4 closest players with a line AoE wave cannon that applies magic vulnerability up for several seconds. He'll do this 2 times back to back, so you want 4 players to stand in Omega's hitbox to bait out the first lasers, then after those first lasers fire, the other 4 players move into his hitbox and bait out the other 4 lasers. We use Earthshaker positions for this to make sure that the lasers never overlap when we are performing this mechanic. There are also targeted AoEs on the ground you'll just want to make sure you don't get hit by. Once the 8 lasers are out, Omega will do a proximity AoE from the center of the room. We just agree on a corner to all sprint to and head there as soon as the lasers are gone. You'll want to stack, heal, and mitigate for this fairly quickly, so saving some instant cast here is not a bad idea. Right after this proximity AoE is another one of those tethers that inflicts the max HP down or doom, so quickly heal the off tank to full, have him grab it, and run it the hell away from the party. You also need to mitigate an atomic ray that comes out right after that, as well as the rest of the party. Next up is the final peripheral analysis, and these fists are akin to the ones from the start of the fight. However, instead of being yellow or blue, there will be 8 red fists, 1 for each player, and when these AoEs collide, they explode for heavy raid-wide damage. It's about 30 to 40,000 damage, but considering you have 8 of these, that means 4 explosions, which means quite a bit of damage. The intended strategy is to deliberately explode them 2 at a time, totaling 4 explosions, with heals and mitigation between each of these hits. You can see in the footage that my fellow Elysium member Keo, as the pro healer he is, breaks the healers first to free them up to cast tons of healing, then the ranged DPS, then the tanks, and then the melee. What most groups do instead is just stack up all 8 fists and tank LB3 the explosions, taking about 30k raid-wide damage total instead of needing to do all that movement. Feel free to choose whichever strategy you like. If you feel like you want to use the LB3 to DPS or even as a panic healer LB3, then learning how to do the red fist properly is very important. If you're resigned to tank LB3Ds or wipe, then stack everyone up and tank LB3 them before the explosion. After the red fist will be another mustard bomb, followed by an atomic ray several seconds later. Right after the atomic ray, Omega will do Flamethrower plus Fire Puddle AoEs. With Flamethrower still having that heavy dot that it applies for several seconds, plus the AoE explosions on each player, raid-wide mitigation is at its most important point here. Ensure to have full HP, rolling hots, addle, shields, and even some follow-up heals after the hits come out. Immediately following this is Starboard or Larboard Surge, so get in and dodge those appropriately while the burn is burning you down. We now come to the final mechanical check of the fight, Pantokrator number 2. This turns up Pantokrator 1's mechanics and demands tighter execution overall. It starts off similar, with Omega heading to the center of the arena for the initial cast. 7 of us stack up and start the phase the same way we did Pantokrator number 1, dodging the placed AoEs through the boss. However, we send one designated player to deal with a giant missile AoE that will target the player furthest from Omega. This AoE gradually tracks the player's position and follows them, speeding up as more and more missiles hit. This player is best off starting directly to the wall nearest where the rest of the party's starting position was. At the same time, Omega begins firing flamethrowers in a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation, with the initial flamethrowers starting east and west. The party stacking and dodging the AoE should begin rotating with the flamethrowers after passing through to the other side of Omega. The person baiting the tracking AoE away from the party should begin rotating with them as well, though they will be on the opposite side of the party and moving non-stop along the outside of the arena. We had our Bard try this once, and they said that they could maintain full DPS uptime while dodging the AoEs. You can also just have a tank go stand in one of the farthest corners of the room and use a tank invuln skill to eat all the AoEs without needing to dodge anything. This only works for Paladins and Dark Knights, as Holmgang puts you a little too close to the boss for Warrior. This costs them uptime on the boss, but eliminates the mechanic entirely. After 10 sets of AoEs are deployed and all the flamethrowers are finished, you'll be hit by another split damage AoE. Shortly after this, both tanks will be targeted by a giant conal AoE each, so they'll need to spread away from the party and from each other. These hit fairly hard and should be mitigated for the remainder of Pantokrator. The rest of the party will need to deal with the wave cannon line AoEs that target the closest player, like in the first Pantokrator. Now there will only be 6 of them here, so break your DPS and your healers up into 2 groups of 3. The first set stands in the hitbox to bait out the markers, then after the first wave cannons hit, the second group goes in and baits out the second set. Tanks, make sure you're at max melee range when dealing with those conal AoEs, so you don't accidentally get targeted here. It will mean certain doom if you don't have a tank invuln skill, and even then, it still might. Also, don't forget all of the small missiles are still hitting the raid throughout all of this Pantokrator. After the second set of wave cannon line AoEs, that proximity AoE will spawn in the center of the room again, so run to the same designated corner that you used in Pantokrator 1. At this point, you just have a few remaining mechanics and you're done with the fight. First up, Omega will do 2 back-to-back surges, so read for Larboard or Starboard and dodge both sets accordingly. After this, he will oddly cast Chrarybdis, which will reduce everyone's HP to 1. Make sure the main tank is taken care of first and that the off tank is topped up shortly after, as there will be a mustard bomb plus a tether AoE for the off tank here. After both of those go off, Omega does 3 back-to-back atomic rays for you to heal and mitigate through before finally casting loot. Be sure to watch for that low HP off tank during the atomic rays, and remember there are 3 of them back to back here, so any sort of remaining mitigation that you have and healing is very important. Now keep in mind that that final cast, Loop, you have about 17 seconds before it finishes casting, and if you don't kill him beforehand, Loop will instantly kill the party, literally deleting you from the fight. If you manage to defeat Omega before Loop finishes casting, congratulations! You got your loot, you won for the week. Awesome, congratulations, good job, well done. And that's going to be a wrap for my guide to Omega Alphascape V3 on the Savage difficulty. It's a really fun fight, and be ready because the next one's gonna be a doozy. Expect the long guide for the next video to be coming out sometime soon. But anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We'll have more 4.4 content coming up on the channel in short time. But anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.